kick off the session, Catherine is going to take you through the training, but at any point, drop a question into the chat and we'll answer you there or at the end. And any questions at all that you have, like, you know, nothing is too silly, because I know that there's quite a lot in this program. So just, you know, put any questions that you have in there and we'll answer them, and we can sort of also take questions at the end as well. So we won't keep you too long, but there is quite a bit to get through, and hopefully it's all of interest. And you know, we've had a great start to the program. I think some of you may have already seen that we've had our first digital educators recognized in the spring program, and we've got some great feedback. We're hoping that that'll help and support us, you know, through this program as we move it forward. But, you know, if you're a local authority, you know, do encourage any educators or anyone that you think might be interested to join. We'd love to have you on board and, you know, to support your educators through the programme and be recognised at the end. So, Catherine, I'll hand over to you, and yeah, let's take it from there.
Thank you, Anna. This is very light touch. There's not lots involved in being a peer reviewer and validator. So this should be fairly light touch and quite quick. I've got about 18 slides to go through just to let you know, but some of them are quite brief. And just to let you know that this session is being recorded and the slides will be available on the Digital Educator Awards Scotland website afterwards. So if you do need to pop out or you want to recap on anything, then you can. A lot of the slides are some of the slides are for information only, really, and useful when you actually get to the point of being a peer reviewer or carrying out a validation, just as a checklist just to refer back to. So the first thing that you need to do if you are a peer reviewer or a validator is to register on the portal. If you've already used the Digital Schools Award website, then you can log in with the same login, so there's no need for you to register twice. And I'll just pop that link into the chat. You should be asked to be a peer reviewer from the applicants. That's likely to be somebody, you're probably both going to be in the same school if you're a peer reviewer. And validators are generally going to be someone in the local authority, so you have likely decided on that yourself and probably won't be notified. But the validators will need to communicate with the applicants about who is the validator for each applicant, so that they can add you to their, from their application, they can add you so that you are appointed as the validator. To understand your role, there are some handy checklists that you can download from the Digital Educator Awards website. And there's one for an applicant, so you can have a look at that if you think that will be useful. And there's a checklist for the peer reviewer and one for the validator as well. And that just gives you step by step the tasks that you need to do. It's just a one-pager, so you'll be able to see what's involved in the role. So just a summary of the peer reviewer role first, and apologies if you're a validator, but it might be useful for you to hear this as well as a validator. But some of you will be both a peer reviewer and a validator, so it will be applicable to you if you're doing both roles. A peer reviewer supports a colleague applying for an award by providing objective and informed and constructive feedback on their submission. And peer reviewers may work in the same school or be part of a professional network or a cluster, or you may even be in the local authority as well. The idea of the peer reviewer is that you are a kind of critical friend during the process of an applicant working through their application. And then at the end, you will peer review the application in full when it's submitted. But along the way, as a peer reviewer, you are there to work with the applicant to discuss their use of digital in their school and in their role, and perhaps just be a critical friend for them to ask questions or for you to offer advice about their application. we encourage you to sort of agree between the applicant and the peer reviewer how often you want to meet between the start of from registering through to submission date, and that's up to you. It could be really light touch. You might not feel like you need to meet at all, or you might want to sort of catch up over a break, or something more formally arranged. You might want it to be really frequent and sort of on a weekly basis catch up, or it might be halfway through and then towards the end. It can be whatever you want. So there's no hard or fast rules, and it whatever works best between you as the applicant and you as the peer reviewer in your school. But the idea, we introduced this as part of the programme, this peer reviewer role, in order for that to be collaborative and developmental, so that it was based on, the applications were being based on professional dialogue and an opportunity for the applicant to discuss things with the peer reviewer and, as I say, act as that kind of critical friend or advisor. As a peer reviewer, you'll be looking at if the evidence is appropriate for the applicant's role and aligned with school priorities and digital development. The peer-to-peer catch-ups, as I say, could be really light touch. It could be just 10 minutes over a cuppa. And peer reviewers typically understand the applicant's role and digital practice and can view the submission through a strategic lens. And the process is supportive. You're not there to do a performance appraisal in any way. It's really just as acting as a guide and a friend. So some top tips for a peer reviewer is to support your colleague with early dialogue. So hopefully by now you do know if you've been asked to be a peer reviewer from the applicants. And the idea is that you will check in with them and check that they're doing okay with the application. They might ask you to review evidence, or you might want to review their evidence and sort of offer guidance and feedback. And really thinking about, does this evidence genuinely represent the applicant's role and impact in digital practice? So we encourage you to start early and set expectations between the two of you about how often you want to meet and when, and whether that's something quite frequent or whether that's just before the submission date, for example. As a peer reviewer, we want you to think about the quality of evidence and sort of ask that question, so what? What changed for learners, or what changed for colleagues, or what changed for the school? So we don't want applicants to, for example, just to be simply listing a list of apps that they use in their classroom as a quick example. We would want to know, why was that app chosen, and what's the impact of that app? What impact is it having on learners, and how might they want to develop it later? So really sort of, if you are a peer reviewer and you are catching up with your applicant, is just to keep in mind that question, so what, and make sure they're sort of really providing some background to why they're doing things. We want you to be constructive but not critical, so thinking about using strengths and suggestions framing. Also keep an eye on upholding digital ethics and policy. So when you are reviewing the application, keep in mind that they are sort of following GDPR and aligning with any school policy, AI policy, or ethical use. And really thinking about how their evidence supports the school priorities and feeds into that, and perhaps feeds into the school improvement plan. And as a peer reviewer, it's really light touch, it's structured, and it encourages reflection. So thinking about, as a peer reviewer, you're thinking about the relevance of the applicant's evidence, how it supports school goals or priorities, strengths and impacts. Any standout innovation, you might want to pick up on that. And when you are carrying out the peer review at the end, when you're commenting on the application, you might want to add a couple of helpful next steps as well. Anything that you think of that might be useful for the applicant to move forward. During the writing retreats, we look at this STAR framework, which you may already be familiar with, thinking about a situation and then describing that situation and thinking about explaining the task and their responsibility, what action was taken and what was the result. So that sort of helps applicants not just to sort of list things that they've done, but really thinking about this STAR framework, thinking about what the situation was and why they decided to introduce something, and what they did and what action was taken, and then the result, and perhaps reviewing how to take that forward. If you're involved in a Digital Educator Award, then the main review focus is on individual practice and learner impact within the classroom. So we're looking for high quality examples of teaching or digital tools or CRIS or collaboration and reflection. If you're looking at a Digital Influencer Awards, then the influence, we're looking at the main focus being about influencing colleagues or working across schools and colleagues across schools or within the school, and looking at that sustained collaboration. So the evidence that we're looking for there is about how they've supported others in changing their practice or improving their digital skills, joint work, impact reflections, working across the school or across schools within a cluster. And then, excuse me, a digital leader, the main focus there is on strategic leadership and institutional change and designing and implementing strategy, digital policy. So the evidence will be looking at policies, CLPL leadership, strategic decisions, system-wide digital improvement, either within a school or across schools. And then I thought I'd just give you some examples of each of the awards. And again, this is an example where I said that you might want to look back at these slides later when you come to looking at the applications. But useful to keep in mind if you are acting as a peer reviewer, just so that you can give guidance to the applicant if you are looking at their application and having some professional discussions along the way about their evidence. So the Digital Educator Award is practice focused and centred on that applicant's own teaching and digital pedagogy. It's not looking about how they may be influencing other staff members. That's for the Influencer Award. So this is purely looking at the individual within their classroom or within their scope of work where they're working. And it's about day-to-day digital competence and looking at the breadth across the 5 competency areas: core skills, CRIS, collaboration, awareness, and enhancing teaching. And I've just listed some examples of the types of evidence that the Educator Award might include. So screenshots and lesson plans, learning artifacts, examples of learners' work, records of digital activities or tools used, evidence of CRIS practices like safe passwords and device management, examples of collaboration with learners or colleagues within their classroom, reflections on practice and impact, so impact perhaps on learner voice or impact on engagement and attainment, how the use of digital technology has supported that, and perhaps evidence of Intel training as well and how that's supported their practice as well if they've decided to do take up the opportunity to do any of the Intel courses. And then again, the same for the Influencer Award. This is focusing on collaboration, leadership amongst peers, and influence across colleagues. So we are assessing how the applicant has influenced others, not just their own practice. And this you must check as well for sustained collaboration. It's not just a one-off activity. It must be something that they're doing on a sustained basis. Evidence is on how practice has spread across colleagues and teams or clusters or partner organisations, and submissions must include a reflective account of how the collaboration started and the challenges and outcomes and sustainability. So for the Digital Influencer Award, the kinds of evidence, and there's lots, so please don't take this as sort of a fixed list. These are just some examples, but perhaps professional learning activities that have been delivered to colleagues, evidence showing others who've implemented applicants' ideas, co-created resources, shared training materials, collaborative planning, records of cluster or cross-organisation work, examples of digital culture change as well, so perhaps new platforms or tools that have been adopted by staff, perhaps working with parents and families, and reflections on the impact on colleagues and organisational practice as well, and that could come from themselves or from the colleagues as well. So as the peer reviewer, you're verifying that the influence is demonstrated and sustained and not just implied. And then finally, the Leader Award. So that's recognising strategic level leadership and organisational digital transformation. So you're examining strategic evidence rather than classroom level practice here. And you need to consider whether the applicant has influenced policy and digital strategy, CLPL planning, procurement, or whole school change or cross-organisational leadership. And evidence should reflect long-term systemic impact and alignment with sectoral policy as well. So a few examples again of evidence that you might want to think about, that the applicant might want to think about and you as the peer reviewer look out for is digital strategy or policy development for a school or across schools in a cluster, records of leading CLPL planning, evaluation and monitoring, evidence of cluster and regional or cross-institutional leadership, case studies demonstrating whole institutional digital development, examples showing impact on procurement, strategic decisions or institutional culture, and evidence of supporting AI literacy or digital transformation or quality improvements as well, like how good is your school alignment and using technology to support that data gathering. So as a peer reviewer, you're ensuring that the submission shows strategic responsibility and not just operational activity. And if you are here today in the capacity of both an applicant and a peer reviewer and a validator, or a combination of those three, and I know some of you are, then these slides might be useful for you as well, thinking from an application perspective, evidence that you might want to think about as well. So step one, we talked about at the start, you've registered as a peer reviewer or a validator on the system if you're not already registered on the system as an applicant, or if you have already registered on the Digital Schools Award, then you don't need to register and you can just log in using those details. So that's the first step. And then the second step, if you're a peer reviewer, in between the point of registering and the point of submission, in between you'll agree between the two of you, the applicant and the peer reviewer, how much involvement you want to have and those professional dialogue, how often you want to have those conversations. And then once the applicant has submitted, you'll then receive an email alert. And you'll receive an email alert when an applicant adds you as a peer reviewer or a validator, and also when you have something to review. So you'll receive two emails, first when you've been added, just as a notification to let you know that you are a peer reviewer or a validator for that applicant, and then when they've actually submitted their application and it's ready for you to peer review or validate, you'll get an email as well, and that's what they look like on the slide. And then if you're a peer reviewer, then it's time then, once it's been submitted, for you to then carry out the peer review. It is very light touch, and I'll give you some more information on that. So you'll log into the portal when you get the email, and from the left-hand menu, you'll click on Awards for My Review. If you are a peer reviewer. If you are a validator, then you'll click on the box Awards for My Validation. So again, they're indicated with the blue arrows there on the left-hand side. Also, you'll see both those boxes. So if you're just a peer reviewer, you'll still see that box for the validator, but if you clicked on it, there wouldn't be anything there. But all the menu options are there. So what you see here on the slide is what you'll see in the portal. And then click on awards for your review, and then you'll see them listed on the main dashboard there. And then you click on against the applicant's name. If you've got lots here, there's only one here in this example, but if you say you are peer reviewing or validating 10, you'll see 10 applications listed, and you just need to click on that view button to then open up the application. And when you do that, you'll see this page, which has text at the top and guidance on some examples of evidence. You'll also see some boxes that the applicant has been able to use as well. The green boxes are all things that are provided by the Digital Educator Awards Scotland, their resources. The amber ones are useful web links that they have, so useful links to websites that might be useful in working on their application. And the blue ones are recommended Intel courses. So that might be useful as a peer reviewer or a validator if you do want to have a click on those and just have a look, or have a look at what the recommended Intel courses are. And that might be something that you feed into your helpful recommendations at the end in your review. You might say, oh, if you haven't seen them do the Intel courses, you might say, oh, you might want to think about doing an Intel course in the future. Well, that's completely optional, but just to let you know that that's what that is there if you want to have a look. And then below that, you'll see the evidence text and the attachments against each of the award criteria. And it's quite a long page, so it's a matter of just scrolling down, looking at each of the evidence sections against each of the award criteria and what they've submitted as their evidence. And then you'll scroll right down to the bottom after you've read their application and looked at their evidence and their text. Some people as well might not do that. They might put all their evidence together in a PowerPoint or a Sway or on a Padlet or on a website, and then you'll probably just see a web link that they've provided and you click on that. So it depends how the applicant decides to submit their evidence. And then you scroll down to the bottom and there'll be a box for you as a peer reviewer to complete and add your comments. And we're expecting you to write about 100 to 200 words. So, you know, about 10 sentences maximum, really, a paragraph of text. That's all that's required. It is really light touch. And once you've filled in the box with your comments as a peer reviewer, you click on the blue button, which is called Approve Survey. You can also submit save as draft if you want. So if you're part way through and then something comes up and you're not ready to finish, you can click the orange button and if you're not ready to submit at that time, and that will save what you've typed in. You can also click send feedback if you like, if you are requesting that the applicant does some further work before being awarded. So if you spot something as a peer reviewer and you think, oh, they've missed out a whole section here, or they've done something in error, or you feel like they haven't quite met the criteria, need some more evidence, you can add a comment and click the send feedback button. And that will then return the application back to the applicant so that they've got the opportunity to update and then send it back to you. So they won't therefore fail. You're just sending it back to give them that opportunity to update anything. And then once you have submitted, then the award will disappear from your dashboard, from your awards for my review, and that is because it's then moved on to whoever is the validator. So that's why it moves from your dashboard. So just some notes to think about is that as a peer reviewer, your job is not to judge in any way. It's supportive, and it's for you to validate and elevate the applicant. So keep your tone encouraging and collegial and forward-looking. And as I say, it's just a paragraph of feedback that we want you to provide. So around 200 words at the most, 10 sentences. If you want to write more, you can, but that's what we're expecting. So as I say, as soon as you've then submitted that and you've completed your peer review, the email alert will then be sent to the validator, and the validator will then be notified by email that they've got something to validate. So they'll get the email. And just to summarise the role of the validator, this is for you to provide the final institutional sign-off for the Digital Educator Awards Scotland submission. So you are confirming that the peer review application is authentic and completed and aligned with the school's ethos and priorities and digital journey. And you again will offer brief comments on the quality and legitimacy of the process rather than judging the applicant's performance. So you're there as kind of that final check to verify that the process has been carried out correctly between the applicant and the peer review. You've read the peer review, you're happy with that. And you're just kind of rubber stamping that. And again, no more than 100 or 200 words, between 100 and 200 words, we're expecting you to write into that validator box. Again, you can write more if you want to, but up to so we're recommending up to a maximum of sort of 10 sentences. So just some top tips for you as a validator is that you are providing a clear, high-level confirmation that the submission is authentic, aligned with the institutional's priorities and procedurally sound, offering support, objective observations, while keeping the process efficient and compliant. So as a validator, you're mainly focusing on the process, not the person. You're checking that the application has been completed properly, that the peer review has happened, and that procedures were followed. So it's not a performance appraisal. It's looking for authenticity, that the submission reflects genuine practice and is consistent with school goals and digital strategy and ethos. And again, as for the peer reviewer, you're keeping your comments concise and high level. You're validating the process, not critiquing the evidence in depth. A brief confirmation and any general observations that you want to write in the box is fine. Also, as a validator, consider impact. So check that the evidence is appropriate and that the peer review was meaningful, and keep an eye on safeguarding and data requirements, that they were met, so that nothing was sort of broken in that respect. And where appropriate, to reflect on whether the process contributed to professional learning or had visible impact on learners or staff. We want you to be objective and supportive, so offering comments that acknowledge strengths and encourage continued development without drifting into formal evaluation. Don't re-evaluate all the evidence. You're just there to verify the integrity of the process. So your role is different to the peer reviewer. And again, to view the application for validation, exactly the same as the peer reviewer, you'll just click on the menu option on the left-hand side called Awards for My Validation, and then you'll see them listed and click on View against the applicant's award for the one that you want to validate at that time. And just finally, again, you will scroll through the application as the peer reviewer did, and at the bottom you can see this blue box. That's what your text box looks like, and it's just a matter of putting some text in there and then clicking the blue button to approve the survey. Or you can save as draft, which is the white button. Sorry, I said it was orange earlier, it's white. The orange button is if you want to send feedback. So again, if you feel that there's something that the peer reviewer has missed or something that you're not quite sure, just like the peer reviewer can return the application to the applicant, the validator can also return the application back to the peer reviewer. So if you did spot something and wanted something tweaked or something changed, then you can write that in the comment box and send the feedback by clicking on that orange button. That will then send it back to the peer reviewer, who can make the necessary changes and updates, and then they'll click Submit Survey again, and that will trigger an email back to you, and you can then complete the validation award. We don't anticipate that would happen. It's not happened so far, but that's built within it just in case that was the case. So for each award, as the validator, you'll see the award criteria, suggestions for evidence at the top, just the same as I went through earlier for the peer reviewer. So you'll see at the top resources in green, useful links in amber, and suggested Intel courses in blue. So you'll just scroll through and review the evidence, light touch. We're not expecting you to carry out a peer review as a validator, and add your comments after the evidence in that box shown there, ringed in blue, around sort of 5 or 10 sentences. And once you're ready, you click the blue button to approve the survey. And then the application is then sent to Digital Educator Awards Scotland, and we'll carry out the final checks. So again, your job isn't to judge, it's to support and validate and elevate, and keep your tone encouraging and collegial and forward-looking. And again, once you've clicked on Approve Survey, then that application will be removed from your validators list, and you won't see it anymore because that would have been then passed on to Digital Educator Awards Scotland. And that's it in a nutshell. So that's a whistle-stop tour of both the peer review and validator. And just a reminder that there is frequently asked questions published on the Digital Educator Awards Scotland website as well, so it might be useful to dip into that. And also there on the website, there's also some really short, sort of, most of them are no more than a minute long videos. So if you do want to just watch a video clip on how to submit your peer review or your validator, that's available there as well. There's some really short video clips because it is really quick and easy to do that. So if you want a reminder, you can watch the videos as well. So I'm happy to take any questions if anyone's got any. Alison, thanks. I can see you've got one there. So is there an expectation that someone within every LA will be available to validate all applications from educators in their area? What is the expectation on what level of seniority of the validator for the Digital Leader Award and the other awards? And do they have to be award holders? Good questions, Alison. Thanks for that. So there is an expectation, and I'll let you, Anna, come in on this if I miss anything. There is an expectation that the local authority will carry out all the validations, and there's no expectation on what level of seniority you have as a validator, but you'll be working within the local authority team, and you don't have to be award holders to validate either. And just to sort of extend your questions in terms of the peer reviewer as well, in terms of seniority, just to link it with the peer reviewers as well, we're expecting the peer reviewer to be in the same school, but if that's not possible, then perhaps within the cluster or a colleague. We're expecting the peer reviewers to generally be on the same level or perhaps above, but it's whatever is most suitable for the applicant, really, in terms of the peer reviewer who will best be able to support them and know their work. So we're expecting the peer reviewers to be within the school and the validators to be within the local authority. Anna, is there anything that I've missed on that?
Yeah, no, it is a great question, Alison. And if you're in the local authority and you want to have like a separate call with us to talk about applications in your local authority, we'd be happy to do that. But the experience from, the spring program is that the local authorities typically would have 2 people, and that, for example, if we look at the spring program currently where we maybe have 50 applicants, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to let all the local authorities with applicants in their area know who they are. So you'll get first of all, you'll have a quick indication of how many applicants there will be for the September period. So if you feel that it would require 2 people, perhaps there's a colleague that would work with you on it. As Catherine, I think, shared here on today's call, like the validator role is really about validating the process, the sort of authenticity, and sort of a final sign off. So hopefully that isn't going to be very onerous, because we're aware that in some local authorities that are bigger, you could have a larger number of applications. But for example, like Aberdeen City, where they had quite a few applications in the last programme, they managed it between 2 people. And, over time, I suppose they could see that there's the role was there to validate, to authenticate, and obviously to see what's happening within the local authority. It was really interesting, I think, for them, because there were applicants that they weren't even aware of, really great applications, really great work getting done. And this program helps sort of shine a light to them in terms of what's happening in and around the schools in their region. So, and that's a similar situation in some of the other LAs, where it was really a great opportunity to see some of that work. And hopefully then those educators will go forward as perhaps case studies to encourage more educators to take part in future programs. So I'm hoping it doesn't feel onerous. The other thing I would just mention, that as a validator, as Catherine said, you may also want to apply. For example, you may be in the leadership team in the local authority, you may want to apply for the Digital Leader Award. And if that's the case, we can also step in terms of the validation piece. and you may want somebody within the local authority to peer review. So there's always a working sort of relationship here. So you may be a validator, and if you do want to apply, let us know, because we can assign somebody to do the validation piece for you. Do you want to answer Sophie's question? And Alison, if that doesn't answer everything, just let us know, because we'd be happy to sort of follow up.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Anna said, we've received fabulous feedback on the first cycle of this from local authorities who said it's been such an eye-opener in terms of having that visibility of all the applications and just being able to see fantastic work schools that they would not know about and can't think of another way that would be possible. So it's been really advantageous, and they can now sort of contact those staff if they want them to speak at webinars for their local authority and take part in events and things. So there'll be lots of sort of opportunities that will open up from you having that visibility from a local authority level. And Sophie, just to answer your question, it's unlikely that we haven't so far had any schools as validators. That's something that the local authority will carry out. So I don't think that would be a possibility. Peer reviewers, yes, we encourage the peer reviewer to be within the school, but not the validator. And if you are, oh, sorry, Anna, go on.
I would just add, yes, it is possible. So obviously it's been, the program was set up initially so that, yes, that for example, head teachers could potentially validate. But in working with the local authorities, this particular model where local authorities have that sort of final sign off has really sort of taken, I think, the program to a new level, and it really starts to bring all of the educators within a local authority together in a sort of a community. But what would happen in that case, Sophie, is that there is a final audit which we sign off. So after the validator is signed off, we just get notification. And so the program would be able to view it, and we would see where the validator is not coming from the local authority, and we would sort of get in touch with the individual or with the local authority to say perhaps there's another route here that we want to take. So yes, the system would allow it, but no, it would be stopped at the audit point.
And I just wanted to add, if there's any LA staff here who are planning to submit an application for themselves, perhaps as the Digital Leader Award, and thinking I'm at the top of the tree and there isn't anybody to validate me, then contact us at Digital Educator Awards Scotland, and we'll support you in your application being validated and look at a solution for that.
Yeah, and I'm just going to do a quick share of the screen. One option, if you haven't had too much thrown at you already at this point, one option. So I'm currently in the portal here, just masquerading. So I'm looking at this is the Digital Educator Award framework. So as an applicant, this is what I'm looking at. Down at the bottom is where applicants will be putting in their peer reviewer email and their validator email, okay? And it's just important to note that the peer reviewer and the validator must be registered in order for your email to be, in order for you to be invited. So, you know, it won't appear as valid and they won't be able to invite you unless you're registered. So that's the first thing. But the other option, while an applicant is in the process of, you know, getting their application ready, uploading evidence, etc., they can also have the option of adding viewers. So here you can add viewers by putting in their email address, and that gives you visibility without a role. So you can't edit, you can't change anything, but you do have visibility. And for some educators, that might just be a sort of a comfort thing, that they might want to invite you as their validator or you as their peer reviewer to view it before they actually add you as their peer reviewer. You'd just be able to see everything. The final thing I'll say on that is they must remove you as a viewer. So you can't be in two roles in this section. So if you were added as a viewer, they won't be able to add you as a validator until they delete you out of the viewer role. But it's an option there that they have if they want to add viewers. And it could even be that they add a viewer that has no particular role, only to view. So that's just a little extra there.
And that might be useful for head teachers as well, Anna, mightn't it? That
Yeah.
the head teacher might want to have few of the applications, so you could add them there.
Absolutely. So is there any other questions?
There's no other questions at the moment.
Okay. Well, the timeline for peer review and validation, I just want to sort of bring this up in case somebody comes back after the holidays, has got holiday brain, and then decides, oh my God, this is too much. I can't finish this by September. It's entirely up to you as a validator and as a peer reviewer. If you're flexible, allow the applicant to take more time. Perhaps it runs into September. And if you're happy as a peer reviewer and a validator to extend the time for validation or peer review, it's entirely up to you. We don't have any deadline. There's no cutoff. There's the system is not going to close. So, and we will obviously coming into August, communicate in a timely way what is the next step. So you don't need to remember all of this. But it is just very important if any of your educators are contacting you saying, oh, look, I can't, I've got too much on, maybe in September I might get around to it, then just work it out amongst yourselves. And we will obviously be communicating to educators the same thing. So the timeline on approving a validated participant, that's in the spring program, which we're currently in, we have set the first 2 weeks in September for peer review and the second 2 weeks in September for validation. So flexibility in and around those, it could even run into October. Nothing is set in stone. What we try to do is create some sort of scaffolding around the program, but a lot of flexibility in the system with the applicant, the peer reviewer and validator all agreeing on that. It is your time, obviously, that the applicant is asking for. So it's really important that you're happy with whatever time frame. Have a lovely rest of evening. If we don't see you before the holiday break, have an amazing time. I hope you're all doing something nice, but at least getting some rest and relaxation. And we're always here if you need anything, don't hesitate. And yeah, see you soon. Hopefully a successful session this term, and then on to the autumn term. We'll be announcing details of that in September, so that if you haven't been able to participate in this particular one, there will be another opportunity starting in October. So thanks everyone, and thanks Catherine for all your support there today.